In his State of the Union address in January, President Obama called for action on immigration reform.
Independent economists say immigration reform will grow our economy and shrink our deficits by almost $1 trillion in the next 2 decades. And for good reason. When people come here to fulfill their dreams, to study, invent, contribute to our culture, they make our country a more attractive place for businesses to locate and create jobs for everybody. So let's get immigration reform done this year.
The president's warning that he will act on his own if Congress doesn't, and the effect of such action on the rule of law, is the subject of Part 3 of the Foundry's interview with Derrick Morgan of the Heritage Foundation.
Executive orders. You've criticized the president early in our interview. You've given various examples. But as you well know, when it came to the DREAM Act and others, the president has acted to address this issue. If Congress decides to do nothing, I think the president was fairly clear in his State of the Union, he intends to do something. What are you going to do to stop that?
Well, I think that at that point, and we did see it with the memorandum that was issued that said they were no longer going to be enforcing the law with respect to hundreds of thousands of people, of undocumented illegal workers and immigrants. And I think that's just wrong, and that shows why you can't trust the president. What can you do to stop it? Well, the Constitution gives the president some authorities, and it gives Congress some authorities, and it gives the courts other authorities. So I think it's really incumbent on the other branches of government to check the president's power in this regard. The Congress has the power of the purse, the power to convene hearings, and so forth. These are all measures that really they ought to be doing even at this point for some of these abuses, such as in immigration and in Obamacare, changing the law back and forth, not enforcing federal drug laws, and the like.
It sounds as though you're not willing at all to work with President Obama on this. Is there any way that you would be willing to say, okay, we'll do E-Verify or we'll do a border security measure and work with this Congress and this president?
Well, I wouldn't say I would never work with the president on these issues. He could show himself to be faithfully enforcing the law. If he were to make a what I would view as a dramatic change in that department, then I think it would be a whole new different conversation. So once we did that, once we had a president, and I'm not going to say President Obama's
But what does a president have to do? What would President Obama have to do to get the Heritage Foundation and the conservatives in Congress that you work with to say, we're willing to tackle this problem now?
Well, I think we need to look inside immigration and outside of immigration for a pattern. And what that pattern has shown us is that whether it be with federal drug laws, which he's decided now, the president's decided he's not going to enforce, no matter what you think about whether drugs should be criminalized or not, he's just decided, even though there's a law in the book, I'm not going to enforce it. And that really hits at the heart of the rule of law. And that shows that he really can't be trusted. So he'd have to change his mind in that case. There's also the case of Obamacare, which might perhaps be the biggest example, where he's decided that employers don't have to now provide coverage, even though the law says they do. Again, no matter what you think of that policy, the fact is he's been changing the law and not enforcing the law at his own whim. And when he does that, he gives very little reason for Republicans or policymakers or anyone to trust that he's going to be a partner on especially such a difficult issue as this.
What would your advice be to Speaker Boehner and to other allies that you have in Congress in terms of tackling immigration reform?
Well, I think that they just have very few reasons to trust this president right now. And actually, immigration reform is not something that the American people are clamoring for. In recent polls, it's been down at 2 or 3%, very, very low on the priority list. What Congress ought to be doing is checking the president's power. People have a severe distrust in Washington right now, and policymakers in Congress really ought to be listening to their constituents, that they want them to make sure the president's not abusing the tax law through the IRS and targeting organizations and things of that nature, instead of really enabling him to get an immigration bill passed that would allow him to ignore the parts he doesn't like and to focus on the areas that he does like, which includes an unfair, costly, and unworkable amnesty.